Y'all, hey, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for stopping by. I am out here with Bo and Daisy. They're enjoying this quick break that we have in the snow, so I'm gonna let them run around and then I will wrangle them, get them inside, get them settled down, and we'll talk about some books. Y'all, we are inside and settled down. I'm going to go ahead and apologize for the light because there is a snowstorm rolling in, so I am losing my natural light. I might end up turning on the overhead lights, which is just going to be unattractive. So I'm going to go ahead and apologize for that and get it out of the way. And if these clouds roll out, then we'll have some light and I will turn off the overhead lights. We'll just deal with it. We got this. But I want to talk books. Y'all, and the first two books that I want to talk about, let me make sure they're in the right order, and that's going to be funny in a minute too, are The Tourist Attraction and Mistletoe and Mr. Right by Sarah Morganthaler. And y'all, I'll explain in a minute why I say let me make sure they're in the right order. These are the first two books in the Moose Springs, Alaska trilogy, and y'all, these are 100% Northern Exposure meets Gilmore Girls. It is small town charm with quirky characters, fun storylines set in small town Alaska. And y'all know how I love small town Alaska. So let's start with The Tourist Attraction. And y'all, the reason I said make sure they're in order is because I did not make sure they were in order. I accidentally started reading Mistletoe and Mr. Right. I don't know if I meant to pick up The Tourist Attraction and I just accidentally got the second book first, or if I picked up Mistletoe and Mr. Right intentionally, not realizing it was the second book in a series. I don't know what I did, but I started reading Mistletoe and Mr. Right first, and I felt like I had wandered into the middle of a conversation between people I didn't know. I could tell that there were stories being alluded to, and that I should know the stories, and I didn't know the stories, and that's when I was like, something's not right here. You know how in some books they just jump into something and just don't give you backstory, and that's just bad writing? Well, I could tell by the writing that this author was better than that. So I backed up, went and did a little bit of research, by which I mean I looked it up on Amazon and realized that it wasn't a book issue, it was a me issue, because I jumped in on book 2 instead of book 1. Backed up, got The Tourist Attraction, and now we're all good. So let's talk about The Tourist Attraction first. So it's set in small town Alaska. And this story is kind of a combination fish out of water, big fish in a small pond story. Our main character is Zoe Caldwell, who comes to Moose Springs, Alaska as a tourist. And y'all, she is a tourist with a capital T, and she is our fish out of water. She's excited to come to Alaska. She has saved up every penny she could from her job as a truck stop waitress in Illinois. Yep, you got it. She's a simple Midwestern girl come to Alaska on her dream vacation to visit her friend Lana Montgomery. Now, Lana is our big rich fish in a tiny struggling pond. All right, hang on. Let me turn on some lights. I don't know if that's actually any better, but where was I? Lana Montgomery. So Lana is rich and fancy, but she doesn't mean to be. She comes from family money, so she just kind of has nice things and expensive taste. She kind of strikes me as, do y'all remember Jessica Rabbit from Who Framed Roger Rabbit? When Jessica Rabbit says, "I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way." Y'all, that's Lana Montgomery. Like, she's not... Like, she would say, "I'm not rich, I'm just drawn that way," which she's rich, right? Like, she's richy rich, like wealthy rich. But she doesn't feel like that defines her as a person. She spends a lot of time working in Moose Springs. She works for her family's business. They're like investors or do acquisitions or something. So she works for the family business and spends a lot of time in Moose Springs, but she loves Moose Springs. So that's part of why she spends so much time there. But some of the people of the town just see her as sort of rich and arrogant and feel like she thinks she's better than them, which she doesn't. But that's just how they see her. This dog. Lana being in the story is how Zoe gets there. Zoe comes to Alaska to visit her friend. It's also how we get some of the interesting supporting characters that we get, some bratty rich kids that we like and that we hate. For instance, Lana has 2 cousins named Killian. 2 Killians. Anyway, that's how cute perky Zoe with her Midwestern charm ends up in Alaska, where she develops a strong attraction to our other main character, who is a buff, burly local named Graham Barnett. Now, Graham owns the local watering hole, and he is not a fan of tourists. He is very vocal of his dislike of tourists. He had named his establishment the Tourist Trap just to try to keep them away, but it doesn't work. The Tourist Trap is the very first stop and a must-see for tourists when they come to Moose Springs, and that drives Graham crazy. Graham is very gruff and grumpy. He's sort of the Moose Springs version of Luke Danes, and it can be a lot, like a whole lot. But y'all, he's got this sweet little blind dog that he is absolutely in love with, and just when you think you've had enough of Graham, and you're about to say, that's it, I'm out, something cute happens with the dog. Like the dog shows up in a new pair of pajamas or something, or he and the dog are wearing matching pajamas. And then you're in all over again. And there's also this troublemaking local moose that Grant's obsessed with, which helps to sort of take the edge off of his personality. So his love of his dog and the moose somehow make his cantankerousness more palatable. So the story, of course, follows the development of the relationship between Zoe and Graham. And it's interesting because she's a tourist and he hates tourists, and she's only there for 2 weeks, so you know the whole time they can't get together. And how is it going to work out? And it's not going to work out. So that's sort of the friction the whole time. It's fun and it's interesting. It can be a bit cliche in sort of the presentation of the we shouldn't be together, we're not going to be together, but we can't help ourselves kind of thing. I did enjoy the book, but there were a couple of parts. Morganthaler seemed to force in some social awareness, which is fine. One character goes on sort of a rant towards the audience about pod coffee makers, how she has a drip coffee maker instead of a pod coffee maker because of all of the waste that pod coffee makers put into landfills, which is fine. I totally get being socially aware and trying to put those things into your work, but in the same work, Morganthaler has a character, Graham, who addresses his girlfriend as gorgeous and darling literally every other sentence. In a couple of exchanges, he says it so much that if you didn't know him and didn't know what he was trying to do, you would think he was being sarcastic. So it just strikes me as odd that an author who would interject that kind of social awareness with one character would have another character who speaks that way. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, and it really didn't affect my enjoyment of Graham as a character or of the book, but I don't know. I just found it a little bit strange. All in all, though, I did enjoy the tourist attraction. I enjoyed Zoe and Graham as characters. I enjoyed watching their relationship develop, and we get to know a lot of characters in the town, which makes sense in hindsight because we know this is a trilogy, so we know that Morganthaler is introducing the characters in this book and that she'll probably develop them throughout the other 2 books. If this were a standalone book, the number of characters that she presents and the way that their storylines interact would seem like a lot, but since we know that this is the first book in a trilogy, it's obvious what she's doing. So I did enjoy The Tourist Trap, and I rolled straight back into Mistletoe and Mr. Right as soon as I finished it. Now, Mistletoe and Mr. Right picks up with Lana Montgomery, who, remember, is our big, rich fish in the small, struggling pond. So Lana is the friend that Zoe came to Moose Springs to visit. She works for her family business, and they're like investors or something. Well, we find out in Mistletoe and Mr. Right that the people of the town think that Lana and her family are trying to take over the town, which they kind of are. Y'all, I am sorry about this light, but I guess it's a little bit fitting for a winter read discussion because this is some wintry lighting. There, like I said, there's a winter storm brewing outside. I'm hoping the clouds will break up a little bit. We'll see. If not, I'll move upstairs to my office where I have lights. So let's talk about Lana. Like I mentioned before, she's in Moose Springs a lot and she really loves the town. And she wants the people there to like her and to trust her. So she tries to win them over by throwing community events and having community get-togethers. Well, nobody comes to her get-togethers, and they just kind of annoy people. So then Lana decides that she should go to where people are getting together. So she goes to a town hall meeting because she needs to talk to the people of Moose Springs about what her family is doing, which is buying the local resort and revamping it to bring new blood and new money into Moose Springs, because she realizes that if they don't do that, that Moose Springs is just going to die because they're just not bringing in the tourist money that they need to bring in to survive. So at this town hall meeting, they talk about this moose that's been rampaging through the town and just causing havoc. Well, for some reason, Lana pipes up and volunteers to deal with the moose. Y'all, Lana has no experience with moose. She's never dealt with a moose. She's never seen a moose in person. But for some reason, she thinks that this is going to be her way of getting in good with the people of the town. So that's part of the storyline that we follow, is Lana trying to deal with this moose. And as she does that, we watch the relationship between her and one of the guys in the town develop. Rick Harding, who owns the local pool hall, has had a crush on Lana forever. Rick is quiet and shy and has a huge heart. He's broke. He has a whole lot going on, does not have time to deal with having a rich girlfriend, but of course he falls for Lana, and we watch this relationship develop. And y'all, this is another one of those mismatches like we see in the tourist attraction between Zoe and Graham. But with Zoe and Graham, it's he doesn't like tourists, she's a tourist, he's from here, she's from there, blah, blah, like that kind of mismatch. Well, with Rick and Lana, it's he's a hardworking, broke local. She's a hardworking, profoundly not broke, not local. So it's the rich girl with the poor boy mismatch. Y'all remember in The Great Gatsby when that insipid Daisy Buchanan says to Gatsby, "Rich girls don't marry poor boys, Jay Gatsby." Well, that's what we're dealing with here. Lana's a rich girl, Rick's a poor boy. So we watch them as their relationship develops and they deal with the friction that that causes. Much like the tourist attraction, it's entertaining and it's fun. It's a bit predictable, but it's still a fun read. It's a great escapist read. It's a slow burn rom-com, and it's fun to watch not only Lana and Rick, but the other characters, because we already know the people of the town, so now we get to know them better and learn more about all of the relationships. So I would say that in spite of a few goofy and overly predictable moments, I really enjoyed The Tourist Attraction and Mistletoe and Mr. Right. My final book for today is How the Penguins Saved Veronica by Hazel Pryor. This book was so very different from the Moose Springs books, y'all. I hesitate to say this because I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but it's kind of slow and charming. When I was getting together my notes for today to talk about these books, I read a little bit about the author, and I found out that she's a harpist. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. I don't know why, but that's just kind of the feel that I get from this book. It's just very mellow and interesting and exciting things happen, but they all happen on sort of like a even keel. Let's get into it and talk about it, and maybe you'll understand what I'm saying, because I feel like right now I'm not making any sense at all. How the Penguins Save Veronica is told from either 2 or 3 points of view. 2 for sure. One is Veronica, who is an absolutely curmudgeonly octogenarian, and the other is her grandson Patrick, who is a mostly useless 20-something. And the third possible point of view is Terry, who is a scientist who writes a blog. And we get little snippets of Terry's blog throughout the book, so I almost feel like that's a separate point of view. But I can see where somebody would argue that it's really not. So I don't know. I'm not going to argue about it. It's either 2 or 3 points of view. Whichever you want to look at it as, it's fine with me. But Veronica and Patrick are our primary storytellers. They're our protagonists that sort of propel us through the story. And y'all, they are both fabulously flawed. And you know how I love a flawed character. And I kind of wonder, as I think back on this book, I wonder if that's what carried me through, was the flawedness of the characters. Because I will be completely honest, there are points at which this book drags a bit. But we have Veronica, who is just a mean old biddy. She lives pretty much alone. She has a caretaker who comes in and helps her out, but she's alone. And she's really alone. She has no family. We don't encounter any friends of hers. So, she's really alone. And she is wealthy. So she's dealing with the question of what to do with her vast estate when she passes away. And it occurs to her that she thinks she has no living relatives, but she's not completely sure. So she enlists the services of a private investigator. And lo and behold, we find Patrick. Veronica finds out that she has a grandson. Now, she knew she had a son because that's not the kind of thing that you can not notice happening. And that was what got her thinking that she needed to look into whether or not she had heirs. That she thought she didn't, but, sometimes things happen. So through that, she finds Patrick. And oh, y'all, Patrick. Patrick is mostly unemployed. He is recently heartbroken, which makes him just that much more of a pathetic dumpster fire. So Veronica decides that she needs to go meet him face to face. And Veronica is not one to ask permission to do something. Veronica just says she's going to do it and goes and does it. So she announced that she was coming to meet Patrick, and she did. So when she met Patrick, because of some things that had just happened, he was particularly dirty and slovenly and just down on his luck and just stoned out of his mind. So you can imagine the kind of impression that made on Veronica, who is very neat and tidy and buttoned down, and she lives alone and has a carer, so she's used to things being exactly the way that she wants them. Well, she invites herself to Patrick's flat, and it is just an absolute mess. So that's the impression of her grandson that she gets. And she's like, nope. He shan't be getting my money. So she has at least solved that question in her mind, whether or not she's going to leave her money to her heir. And the answer is no. So she's back to deciding what to do with her money. Well, she goes home and accidentally watches a documentary on penguins. And it talks about how the penguins are losing their habitat and they're going to be extinct and all of these bad things are happening. So Veronica decides she's going to leave her money to the penguins. But just like with Patrick, she has to go and see them and see the research facility and see what she's going to be giving her money to. Well, y'all, the penguins are in the Antarctic. So she sends word to the research facility that she's coming to see it. And the scientists are like, no, thank you, no, please, no, don't come. And of course, Veronica goes. And that's the story that we follow, is Veronica getting herself down to Antarctica and things that happen while she's there. And y'all, I don't want to say too much because, as usual, I don't want to give spoilers. But this story is a very slow burn, and I feel like it's worth the grind. It gets pretty deep at times. We travel back in time with some World War II era journals, deal with some issues like loss and recovery, conservation issues, climate change issues. It's really interesting. Like I said, it's a slow burn. There were times that I truly had to drag myself through it. And I think that it was my love of the flawed characters of Veronica and Patrick that really got me through it. But y'all, there was something that I missed until the very end. So I mentioned that there are blog posts from one of the scientists throughout the book. And it's very penguin-y because it's a scientist writing about penguins. Y'all, I don't dislike penguins, but I don't really care about penguins. So I kind of skimmed through them. And I think I might have missed a lot by doing that because towards the end of the book, when I really started reading the blog posts, it seemed to me like the penguins in the blogs were metaphors for the people that we were reading about. I know, duh. I know the blog posts are some sort of literary tool. I don't know how I missed it, but I read the book over about a week's time because I wanted to be done to talk about it today. I think if I were reading it at a more leisurely pace, I would have enjoyed it more. I did enjoy it. I think I sold the book short by not realizing what the blog posts were. So that's a me issue, not a book issue. But in all, I would say that How the Penguins Saved Veronica is a charming, slow read with lots of layers to it. And if you take your time and read it, I think you'll really enjoy it. All right, y'all, that's it for this week's books. As you know, I'm always looking for my next great read, so feel free to drop me a comment and let me know what you're reading. Y'all, thanks so much for coming to my channel. If you haven't already done so, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I upload new food and fitness content every Monday with book videos sprinkled in between. See you on the next one.